Greetings, welcome everybody. Thank y'all for your patience. Apologies for getting started a little bit late tonight. We had some technical difficulties, but we figured it out and we are all here. Welcome to Real Talk with ZSJ. This is just our second show since the return, and I'm excited to bring back some regular guests, some guests who've been on before. I have Brother Talawa and Sister Niara, who's actually joining us all the way from Ghana. So I'm really grateful that they're both here, and we are going to be talking about bedroom colonialism, y'all. We got to talk about it. And let me just frame the background, right? So I made a post. This maybe been a couple months ago now, right? About Serena Williams and another sister. I believe her name is Felix. She is also an athlete. She's a track star. You know, she's an Olympic athlete. And I remember seeing on somebody else's Facebook page that Serena, is really highlighted. Her family, all of that is highlighted, a lot more than Sister Felix because she's married to a white man. And y'all, when I tell you comments came from left and right, people was just most people, of course, defending, bedroom colonialism, which I actually thought was really strange. And I remember Tyler commented on that, and Sister Niara came in. I said, you know what? We got to have this conversation again because we've talked about this before, and I believe I had talked, had you on before. So anyway, I wanted to just frame that for everybody, but shout out to people who are already here, people in the chat already. Sister Shanette, welcome. More Zion Trading Post, welcome everybody. Sister RM, the baddest moderator in the building, she is here. Thank you, Sister RM. So yeah, cool. So if you're watching, why don't you let us know where you're watching from? Put that in the chat. What part of the country, if you're in the US, what state, what city, and if you're watching internationally, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. So anyway, Talawa, please reintroduce yourself to the audience.
Hotep family, this is Talawa Dodo, and I love anytime I get to chop it up with Zakia and Niara. I'm always excited. And I'm sure you'll get more about my ideas as in our conversation, because I'm just ready to get going.
Let's do it. Sister Niara, reintroduce yourself to the audience.
Hi, my name is Niara Abana. Abana means child born on female child born on Tuesday. So that's where the name Abana comes from. And Niara is Swahili, which means one with purpose. I currently live in Ghana. I am the wife of Michael Scott, who is an educator, and I am the mother of 4 sons and 1 daughter.
What a blessing. And of course, I'm your sister Zakia. I am actually not home. I am in a hotel room right now. I'm out of town traveling. I'm in North Carolina, traveling for work. So yeah, that's what part of the country I'm in right now. But yeah, let's just jump into this conversation again. Talawa, I really think that it's important for us to redefine or define what bedroom colonialism, because I feel like people are probably joining because they probably like, what is bedroom colonialism? You know what I mean? Because like you could probably infer, but I think it's really important. You smiling, but I think it's really important for you to define what is bedroom colonialism.
So the short the short end of it is, for me, when a African person is engaged in relations, sexual or marital relations, with a person who is not African. And the reason why colonialism is in there is because the point is we only engage in these relations because of the colonial context we exist in, and that colonial context is the system of white terror domination, or the system of white supremacy, however you term it.
Niara, anything to add on that in terms of?
No.
Okay. What do you say to people who, because I can hear people right now, but why don't you just let people love who they want to love? Love is love. right? Like, ain't love love? You just love who you want to love. Like, you just, you don't really choose who you want to love. You just love.
I think that that's such a false misconception, not just as it relates to romantic relationships, but everything that it is that we do, what we find desirable, whether it is in a mate, whether it's a vehicle, whether it's how we define intelligence, even. All of these are social constructs, right? And even those of us who are aware that they exist, we still have to be continuously and constantly mindful, right, of deconstructing that, right? Because this is the the framework that we find ourselves existing in. So to say that we have absolutely no control over who we fall in love with, that's nonsense. We absolutely do. But we have to make a conscientious choice, right? When we understand that we, I think the first thing that we have to begin with, right, we have to set some parameters when having this conversation, right? First, we have to acknowledge, one, that we are living under a system of white terror and white domination. And we have to also acknowledge, right, that we are existing in this current dispensation of time as Africans with a fractured sense of consciousness, right? So we are operating and functioning outside of our African mind. And so what does that mean, right? We are not the Africans that we were 500, 1,000 years ago, right? We see the world through a shattered consciousness, and that shattered consciousness has to be mended. But if we first don't acknowledge that, right, then we can't even get to the part or get to the discussion of talking about and deconstructing, right, and analyzing bedroom colonialism because we don't even understand that we are operating outside of our African mind. So I think that every conversation that we have, it has to begin with that understanding first. And that's why we have this, this tug of war anytime we have any type of conversation surrounding anything, right? Because we don't first acknowledge the fact that we are dealing with a shattered African consciousness.
That's right. You sounded like Dr. Amos Wilson to me right now. I love listening to his videos, and my husband and I, we have all of his books at home, and he always talks about the falsification even of African consciousness. All of that is connected, and we don't talk about that enough. When you say out of our African minds, that's exactly what I think about. Talawa, I want to kind of bring you in on this as well because that's the first retort. Like when people, like when I go back and look at like some of those comments, like it's like, well, black men didn't want her, and I'm just like, what? Why are y'all saying that? Like, where is the evidence? The evidence was anti-black male instead of anti-white male after all the history, right? After all the current history, like I mean, like contemporary things that are continuing to happen. Yeah, just what was your thoughts? I don't know if you remember the post, but I would love to bring you in on this conversation.
Mm, okay, I did want to add a little bit to what you said about Nana Amos Wilson.
Yes, please.
Tastes and desires are manipulated. I think what he says about that
That is Amos Wilson. Yes,
is really
it's
important.
manipulated. Yes.
But in terms of, and I think what happens in conversations like that, people will either want to acknowledge that or not want to acknowledge that, and that's usually how that's usually how those go. But in terms of the fallacy of, black men not wanting Serena, I I mean, so the white men who make cartoons of racist cartoons of her do like it's just it's I think I realize when it comes to our people's confusion, and this is one of those areas when you're talking about bedroom colonialism, having crack is in the bed and whatever. It really, we say anything. It's really one of those things. Sometimes I had to realize we say anything, and I think what bothers me too is when I particularly get annoyed is when I hear it from people whom I expect to know better. That's kind of when I'm like, huh? It just kind of, that's kind of when I get thrown off. When I'm like, okay, so you're telling me. And then another part of the question though that is a bit important is when we're talking about which types of black men are eligible, the materialism that's in that question. That I should point that out. That's important. So you saying there's no, black male millionaires who like her? Because why can't she be as a guy who makes 50K a year, for example? Why? Because when we get into it, you know what I mean. I'm just, just for example.
If I can get off mute. This is an
And
interesting question.
I,
Oh,
I,
go
I
ahead.
think that, can I jump in?
Yes, please.
I think that's an excellent point, right? Because that's one of the things that I noticed in that conversation surrounding Serena Williams. And it's not only just Serena Williams, it's anytime it's a high profile black woman, that is a multimillionaire. It's as though the only black eligible black man, or a man who's considered of value or worthy of a Serena Williams, has to be someone, who is a billionaire status, you know. And so, like, even that, the how we define who is considered an eligible man, how we define who is considered, worthy, that in and of itself, it's a Eurocentric lens, right? Because this is their value system. That's not coming from an African perspective. We don't place value on individuals based upon, their net worth. But that's the only thing, when you're viewing a partner through a Eurocentric lens, that's the first thing that you look at. That's how you assess, and place value on whether or not, your male partner, is worthy, whether or not
Yeah.
whether or not he's going to be, an eligible mate for you.
Yeah. We've talked about the political, right? Like, because, like, just politically, and even if I'm honest, like, even before I was conscious, like, I literally have never been attracted to white men, like, ever. Like, before I was conscious, like, I mean, but I also grew up in the American South. I grew up in Alabama. It was still like, you just knew, right? Like, that's a line you don't cross. And plus, I grew up in the black belt of Alabama, so the schools that I went to did not have white people in them. Even in the 80s and 90s, there were no white people in my schools in Beloit, Alabama. That is a rural community in Dallas County, Alabama, the same county seat for Selma. And so when I moved to Ohio, I remember being taken aback. Well, when I moved back to Ohio, I was born in Ohio, but I left as a child, a little child. Um, but when I moved back, I was in high school. And I remember, not necessarily in high school, but just in the community, seeing black men with white women. And I just remember being like, I just thought that was strange. You know what I mean? This is the 90s. You know what I mean? So I was like, oh, that must be the thing here. Cause you never, not in the 90s and 80s. Like, I know you see it in Alabama now, but not where I grew up. You just didn't see that. It was like taboo. Like, everybody knew what the line was. You know what I mean? Like, it just is what it is.
But that's also something that has been, social. It's been engineered because you also didn't see on the big, like now, right?
And that's
When
what
it
I'm
started,
saying.
I would say about 15 years ago.
Yes.
You cannot turn on the television. You can't drive down the street. You can't turn on the
You
computer.
can't walk through the mall, Sister Niara. I was at the mall this weekend, went into Lens Crafters literally just to buy some spray to clean everybody in my house
Looks like, am I frozen?
Okay, I think. Can you hear
It's
me?
her. It's on her end.
Yeah, yeah. Or am I frozen?
Okay. So you can hear me.
I can hear you, Niara.
Okay. So she's frozen.
So I guess while um, we're waiting, I guess I would add in terms because I think she was bringing up. Oh man, I lost my train of thought. It was like a stream. I was listening and I was into what we were saying.
Oh no, we lost her altogether.
She's probably gonna just pop back in. She's probably gonna pop back in. No, it's like in everything, whether especially if you're on
You
last the last like 2 or 3 years, I've been seeing like all these tragic arrangements. That's also another term I use for bedroom colonialism. I use tragic arrangement.
Tragic arrangements.
I have that term I got
This
from
hotel Wi-Fi is janky, y'all. So I apologize.
It's
all right.
okay.
I had to hook up to my cell phone,
Oh, you did. Oh
my
wow.
hotspot. Yeah, the hotel. I don't know whether it timed out, but anyway, I'm back. Y'all go ahead.
No, it's just
No,
in.
I was just making the point that it's everywhere you go. I'm not just in person, right? But it started on the big screen. Every you never see. It's definitely not a heterosexual black couple. You know,
Mm,
but you never see a black man and a black woman. It's always a black man and something other. And likewise, if it's a black woman,
Yep.
first of all, you rarely even see a black woman in a relationship.
Right.
The great majority of the time, she's single, you know, and when she is in a relationship, she's in a relationship with someone other than a black male. And it's very intentional.
But let's talk about why. And I think we got into this a little bit on the last conversation that we had about this, right? We got into this a little bit. This idea of Mama Frances Cress Welsing, right? White genetic annihilation. And we have talked about the two different sort of schools of thought. Liberal white folks, right? They're not like saying this is what they're doing, but it is what they're doing, so to speak. We've talked about blockimiento, but they're using this as a way to continue themselves, if you will, if that makes sense. And I don't know.
Absolutely, because
Yeah, please, like, talk about that. Like, we've talked about like the political, but like, let's
I
just
think
get rid of the
I
in
think
you.
the
Yeah, go.
misconception that a lot of black people have, right, who don't understand, is that, oh, well, if a white person marries a black person, then they must not be racist, right? But
Not at all.
I think that white people collectively have a very different uh, mentality and concept of marriage than black people do. And also, they look at things from in the long run. Long range, they understand that in a couple of generations, right, they will have bred out the black gene, because in most cases, most mulatto children, they do not marry black.
Oh, I have a
I mean,
question, sister.
we have several examples. I'm sure Serena Williams' daughter will not marry a black person. Number one, because
Unfortunately, because she's being socialized not to.
he's being
Unfortunately,
Right.
socialized in a white environment. Look at both of Barack Obama's daughters, right?
Oh wait,
the white boy.
sis,
Well,
I have
one
a
of them is
question.
with a black boy. She was.
Wait, quick question,
Go
sister
ahead.
Niara. Do you have like a article for that? I've been trying to look for that about what most mulatto children end up dating, whatever, marrying.
Michael Jackson. Hold on. No,
Yes.
seriously. Look at the descendants of Diana
Diana
Ross.
Ross. Oh,
Ain't none of them black.
nope.
So I mean, that that's like back then that was a little bit more of an anomaly. Now it's the socialization is there. I think I cut off when I was trying to tell you about the mom. I live in
Yeah,
the
you did.
Yeah, I live in the DC region, and I was at Lens Crafters. I went into Lens Crafters inside of the mall, and I walked out, and I'm just like, the advertising, for glasses is a black woman, and specifically they're targeting black women because right now black women still are the least likely to marry and date outside of black men, along with I believe Asian men. That's been like that for years. You know what I mean? So the targeting of black women is they're doing it through the socialization process. Look, it's cool. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you can move up. And I feel like there's also been a social media campaign where you see these people who look black, right? Because they're hiding behind like a profile picture that's a stock photo or some shit, and then really white folks or FBI, CIA, whatever. You know what I mean? So I feel like they're being manipulated too, even on social media, even with the anti-black misandry that we see that proliferates all over it.
And there's a social media campaign, but I mean, there's a broader media campaign as well. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I think it was maybe about a year and a half ago, 2 years, Viola Davis in an interview stated how she wants to see more interracial relationships, on-screen interracial relationships between black women and white men.
She did.
And yes, she did. And her rationale for that was because it would make black women appear to be more desirable, you know, if they are seen being loved on by a white male. And if you notice, starting with her role in the movie, I think it was called Widow. Um, every subsequent role we've seen her in, she's been partnered with a white male. It's very intentional, you know.
Wow. It's very intentional. And I don't know if y'all can see this comment from social scientists, but yeah, like, yeah, they planning. They thinking about the white great grandchild because
Oh,
by the third generation, it's done.
yeah, I need to say something
Exactly.
about that. I need to say something about that because what
Please.
social scientists. Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
please.
Okay, I thought there was a lag. This is important what he says. I like that, or what they're saying, because I don't know social science. I don't want to think. But what they're saying about one step to the mixed child, particularly this idea that mixed is black, that's another dangerous thing when we
Mhm.
say that mixed, the one drop rule. And I had to actually, because I teach and I had to explain this to students. The one drop rule was a legal concept, right, about white inheritance and social space designating. So if you have a mixed child, are they going to sit at the black side of the table, or the white side of the restaurant? It's kind of like how if you're an immigrant to the United States, and if you're in the States for a certain amount of time, you get taxed like a citizen if you're in the States for a certain amount of economic years. It's not literally, oh, you're a mixed child. It doesn't mean that, but it's become that. But it's a legal concept. I think that's important. But some of our people get into this idea, well, if I have a child that's mixed, they're still black. And it's like, no, no. If you want a black child, why not be with a black person? It's just the whole thing about that mixed is equals black thing just drives me nuts.
Can y'all see this picture? I wanted to make sure I shared it. Brother Talawa, sent this, and I wanted to make sure I shared it. What specifically did you want to bring out in this photograph?
Oh, I just think visuals are very important when talking
Absolutely.
about this issue, because and this goes to social sciences point, because this is something me and my wife, obviously my wife is an African woman, of course. We have this conversation all the time. We usually think about the two people in the relationship, or really
Hmm.
the person who's a victim of the bedroom colonizer and then the lineage hijacker, because
Hmm.
that's what I call this white person or non-African person. They're a lineage hijacker. And
Hmm.
that picture illustrates why, because a lot of times we're not thinking about children in these conversations, because you
Right.
see how Sis Niara was saying even on television, and I've seen this even with Crackaflix or Netflix, where it's usually not, it's non-heterosexual, or it's a bedroom colonialism, or what I call a black sinking ship. And the reason why I say a black sinking ship is because of that image right there. So there's no black in interracial relationship. It's just a black sinking ship. That's what we should really call it, because you're seeing
Wow.
blackness. And none of those things lead to a black child, right? And then you have to get into the economics of that, right? We talk about, intergenerational wealth. There's no potential for that if, one, you're in a non heterosexual arrangement. And even look at Queen Latifah. She adopted a child. That child looks like they're either biracial, or whoever the person was involved was probably white. I don't know if you heard about that.
Oh no, I hadn't.
So
Wow.
her and her partner. So there's no, and then of course, if they're with a person who's non-African, that there's no African child. All of these relationships have in common no African child, no African
Mhm.
child. Anything that directly gives birth definitively to an African child is not
Right.
true. And I think that's important, because when these relationships are discussed, children are usually not a part of people's conversation,
Right.
and that's
Right.
very Eurocentric to me.
Extremely Eurocentric.
And I think that's an excellent point that you make because, when you take into account what does it mean to be African, right? And you're talking about these children, because that is a great assumption that if the child has one black parent, then they're automatically black. And I also reject that because, again, you have to go back to what does it mean to be a black person? What does it mean to be an African? It's much more beyond, your biology, your genetics, right? It's an African consciousness because when we understand being, right, from an African sense, right, it's about your consciousness, it's about your spirit. And so these children who are socialized
Oh my goodness. Is it me? Can you hear me, Talawa?
Yeah, I can hear you. The white people don't like
Okay.
this conversation.
No, they definitely messing with
The
this
ones the
conversation.
ones who want to get their mandingo fetish, they don't like
They
it.
get that right, right. Yeah, because I thought it was me again. I'm like, damn it, now my
I'm probably next. I'm probably
my
next.
mobile spot hotspot. Yeah, she can come right back in. My mobile hotspot is messing up. But no, like I think this is an interesting question again from Trigger Happy. But absolutely, I think that we should always be trying to make sure that we're keeping our lineage black. I'm very conscious of that now because I just thought it was strange that the marketing just was so heavy, specifically with black women.
Right. It goes into the, like, I'll give an example of this too, and goes into the individualistic indoctrination.
Yes,
With,
that part. Talk
with
about
the what's the thing? Because who's good for this is Sister Toyo. Man, she is good because that's part of her research. Of course, is the propaganda, the scandal effect. I don't know if
it.
you'd call it that. I call it. Her and I have this conversation. I call it the
Hmm.
scandal effect, where even if you have, and I think Trigger Happy raised that question, and it was a good
Hmm.
question about, well, most Black people are married to Black people. How do you respond to it? And I think there's a couple of things. One, the psychological, because I think of, when I think of these arrangements, these black sinking ships, they have like a grenade effect, and
Hmm.
they do damage to everything in their radius. So it's not just the person that's been a victim of bedroom colonialism, but how it impacts the psyche of the people around them. Like
Hmm.
you're communicating, oh, this is an ideal relationship, that it's not a problem, and then the children that are in close proximity to that, they're in the explosion's radius.
Hmm.
They get hit by the grenade, so then they start thinking it's okay, or I can't be a black nationalist because what about my white auntie? You see what I mean? Or
Yeah,
how this good? So it's a that's why I say it's lineage hijacking, or maybe it's better, more accurate to say lineage invasion, if not hijack.
invasion. That's
So
exactly
invasion, absolutely.
it only
invasion.
takes one. It just takes one. Unfortunately, it just takes one to kind of cause damage. So there's that political question as well too. That's where the politics come in.
Well, yeah,
And
I mean, go ahead.
I also feel like it sets a standard. For example, just I can look at my own um, personal network, right? And those who I know who allow their children to engage in bedroom colonialism. It signals to the other siblings and the members of the family, right, that this is a standard that is acceptable. So, for example, I know several people where the elder child has engaged in bedroom colonialism, right? And then when you look at the other siblings, the younger ones, right, they follow suit, right? So then you end up having a situation where a woman who has, four children, four sons, and all four of her sons are engaged in bedroom colonialism because that elder son has set the standard.
Mhm.
And so, what are you saying? There are no eligible Black women for all four of your sons? None of them were able to find, an eligible Black woman.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then again, what is the criteria that you're looking for? What are you basing that on?
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely.
I've seen
And
that. I've seen
well,
a situation exactly like that when I
well,
was
we
younger.
know that white men intentionally impregnated African women, during their conquest and colonialism and slavery and everything to create a buffer, if you will, a buffer class who will have split allegiances. Like that's a tool of war. That's the other part that we ain't even talked about. Now, unfortunately, the Chinese are doing the same thing in parts of Africa. Like, can we talk about that even as a tool of war? Like it's deep. This is deep in a lot of ways. It's not. That's why I keep telling people it is not about love. So when everybody was like, "Ooh, he loved her," they trying to act like this white man. I said, "Oh, did Thomas, what's his name, Thomas Jefferson? Did he love Sally Hemings? No." These white men not these motherfuckers are trying to survive, y'all. They don't love your black behind. They're
Well, I
trying
think when,
to survive.
I think when you frame it like that, right, that it's a tool of war, right, we first have to acknowledge, right, that there is a war being waged, against us. And I think the masses of our people, they refuse to acknowledge that. They're in denial of the fact that there is an actual war being waged against African people, globally. And much of that has to do with the fact that we have this very narrow concept of what war means, right? So because we're not all, dressed in military uniforms and, out in the streets engaged in, you know, um, an exchange of gunfire, then we don't actually consider ourselves, engaged in a war.
Mhm. Yeah, there's
But
many war.
there are many tactics of war.
Many tactics. That's what people gotta understand.
There's economic warfare, right?
I mean, Mama Frances Cress Welsing told us, the 9 areas of people activity and racism. Sex is one of them. I know a lot. I know that there has been a group of liberal white people that have spent a lot of time shitting on Mama Frances Cress Welsing, and of course,
As well as
yeah,
radical black leftists.
of course, yeah,
Of course,
yeah, of course, yeah.
and
In
I
fact,
think
that's actually when I lost respect for Mark Lamont Hill. Complete respect.
Right, he didn't waste any time.
Mm,
Like he transitioned, and if not that same day, definitely the following day, he was on his soapbox.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's yes, it's completely. I think that I don't want to say I feel like it's a losing battle because I think we're one of the few people, even within the community, that's even talking about it. Like I don't even see other podcast hosts dealing with, they call it interracial relationships, dating, whatever you want to call it. But most even black nationalists are not focused on relationships. They figure, I've heard a lot of folks that say, well, most black people marry each other anyway. Well, how long you think that's going to be the case with this intentional campaign that's happening? And specifically, as one of the commenters said earlier, like they're targeting our children. to see. Oh
Well,
yeah, ain't nothing wrong with Sally. You know, Sally real cool. You know, she was nice to me. She defended me. You know, like they don't. We're not teaching our kids nationalism at all.
no, no, of
I mean,
course not. I mean, even, I mean, especially among, the black left. I mean, just, I don't know if you're, yeah, you are, because you posted about it, the situation that happened in Los Angeles with the city councilwoman Martinez.
yeah,
Right.
of course I posted about it. Yeah, talk
Right.
about
So there are those on, the black left in that camp, right, who feel this was a situation that was orchestrated by whites to divide the black and brown community, right? So I don't think that, I think that black nationalists and race first, black people, that we are an anomaly in this dispensation of time. So absolutely no, you're not going to hear this type of conversation being held, in most spaces, even what is considered to be, black progressive spaces, because the masses of our people don't see it as a problem.
You know, was wait, can I be heard?
absolutely.
You know what is a problem to Sister Niara's point? I think about it. Even, I don't want to get into, whether I agree or disagree with him on this, but I love that he does this. Umar Johnson, Dr. Umar Johnson, is one of the few that will publicly say why, out of black sex is incorrect, or out of black relationships are incorrect. And watching him on the Roland Martin show, really, that, like, it just from an analytical standpoint, you can really see how we don't make that connection between um sex and white terror domination
Mm,
consistently. The way that they were on that panel, like, I know they're integrationists, but they were completely devoid of any critical understanding of what he was saying. It was like, I was like, wow,
mm-hmm.
wow.
Yeah. Anybody want to deal with this question?
What
I
was the
think
what?
he must have just came in because we kind of talked about this.
Oh,
Talawa, I know you talked about this. He must have just came in. Emmanuel.
oh, was it the question? I think there was a question before, or was it this?
I didn't see the one before. It might have been when my internet messed up, and y'all
Oh,
probably saw it and I
so
didn't.
this is the question: who, the biracial question?
Yeah, it says who loses when there is a biracial child conceived. We black people have the dominant gene pool, correct? So I believe that it depends. With a lot of Black Americans, unfortunately, there's been a lot of mixing down the line. So, like for example, I have a uncle who married a white woman, and his kids don't look black at all because we have white ancestry. Now, if it's an African, I've seen like literal Africans, like who don't have like white ancestry in the last, what, 12, 7 generations. I have seen children come out darker than me, and have a white parent. So I think it just depends. And if that child then mates with another black person, then yes, the white gene pool is destroyed. But if that child mates with another white person, then the same sort of, like, it's still what I believe Tyler would call genetic insurrect. What did you call? What was it? What did you say,
I,
brother?
I make up a lot of crap sometimes.
I'm
Um,
not, but it was good though. Like, say
um,
it again.
I make up crap sometimes because, no, it's just because I've had to deal with this issue on a lot. Like, I've had to experience dealing with this way too much, unfortunately. But I call it lineage jeopardy. So to
Yeah,
Manuel's point, you don't want to put yourself in lineage jeopardy. You don't
right.
want. So I always say, just do the safe thing. Find yourself an African man if you're an African woman, and if you're an African man, find yourself an African woman. Just keep it simple. Let's not get
Mhm.
complicated.
Oh, okay. He said he was kicked off. Well, I don't know how that happened because I don't remember. Maybe it's one of my moderators did it. I'm not sure. Well, yeah, no. Like I said, it depends. I've seen, and my uncle is actually dark. You know what I mean? but his mother was super light and his father was dark, and he just happened to come out with his father's complexion. But he married a white woman, and his kids, like you can tell they not all the way white, but they don't look black.
Diana Ross. I think you mentioned Diana Ross from the top.
Diana Ross,
That
yeah,
is scary.
that is scary.
That is very scary.
Her grandkids are literally white.
I haven't seen her grandchildren. I've
You
never
don't
seen
want
them
to.
before.
Because her son is the one that married the white woman, and those kids are white. The son, the light
Well, but
skinned
if you
son,
look
that his
at
dad is white.
what's the woman's name? I can't remember. I want to say it was Denise. I don't know if she was married, but she was in a relationship with, what's the guy's name? Charlie Sheen.
Mm.
And I don't know if you all remember, because this was some years ago. A tape recording was leaked, and in the recording, you can hear him calling her a nigger.
Wow.
So when the backstory came out, right, she actually, if it's not her grandmother, it's her great grandmother, was a black woman. But you would never know this when looking at her, because she looks like, you know, a full, whole Caucasian woman,
Hmm.
which is my point, right? You know, she chose to marry. Imagine what her children will look like, right?
Hmm.
So that's why, I feel like we have to abandon this one drop rule, right? It's
Yeah,
something that was imposed.
I'm with
It's
y'all on
something
that.
that was
First,
imposed. It was something
I'm
that was
with y'all on
imposed
that.
upon us.
I mean, at first, I wasn't, because I was like, well, damn, my great grandma wouldn't be black because she has a white parent, but it wasn't her mother who was enslaved. It wasn't her choice. You know what I mean? So it is what it is. But you're right. Like my great grandparents, neither one of them would be black then if we got rid of the one drop rule, because both of them had white fathers
Hmm.
who were rapists. Yeah. But no,
And, and
but
so in situations like that, I think, there's
yeah,
room for.
yeah. No,
I
they
was
were.
saying,
No, what I'm saying is they have. So they realize that the overt racism socialized black people in a certain kind of way. Even the most light skinned, like white looking black folks were socialized as black. Look at Huey Newton, right? Like shit, look at Farrakhan, like the most light, they are socialized as black. Like they see themselves as African, period. But what they're doing now is reversing that. They're
right.
literally reverse, because like my grandparents, you couldn't tell them they wasn't black. They were, yeah, we black. My kids are black, you know. But now that's
But
literally
they were also victims, right?
of
So
course.
so that I wouldn't categorize them, with children, biracial children, today, who are
Today,
the
right,
a product of an interracial relationship,
right,
you know.
consensual. Because I don't argue that
Exactly, a
especially back then
consensual
that black
relationship.
women had the right to tell a white man no, right? A powerful white man, because their father was the sheriff. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, when you look at the power dynamics, in that situation, it's completely different.
It was literally rape, yeah. Being afraid to say no. Right.
Right.
Absolutely. No, it's different now. I agree. And so now you see, now you see it's basically reversed. Like especially when you hear from the kids, because like integration, and it's honestly it's an unfortunate thing about integration. Our kids go to school with these people, you know what I mean? For the people who are in places where the public schools are integrated, because there are still parts of the South, there are still parts of Mississippi, baby, where you can still go to an all black school. Yes. There are still parts of Alabama where you can still go to an all black school, but that's not everywhere. Those are not the academics that are coming. The academics that are in academy now, them motherfuckers went to white schools. They went to school with white, like you can tell they comfortable. Like
I
they
can
like
tell you
white.
that for a fact. I can attest to that.
Hey, I know I can too. I went
I
to school
mean,
with them.
I know, because I know. Oh man, it's just
They
because
love white people, honey.
I'll give an example of this. At one institution I was at, the Black Student Union hosted a conversation. I was teaching at the time, but some of the undergrads invite me because I talk about this in class because I was in a program where I could talk about it, one of the very few in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I have like a lecture I do with students about bedroom colonialism and everything. It's really good for athletes, especially important that they
Oh,
understand.
they've been
They
targeting our
need it.
athletes since the
Yeah,
70s.
they really need it. And what was really, you can tell who has a lot of emotional white attachment in those
Yes.
conversations. And the second thing, like one comment that always stood out to me, and this is where you have to talk about Eurocentrism, the individualism, and the cultural alienation, is when there was one sister who said, when I date, why do I have to think about my people when I'm
Wow.
dating? I thought that was the most profoundly disturbing statement. I've never heard it quite said, but it just shows you the effects. This is now you're looking at generations who are socialized towards integration as a norm, not as an option
Yes.
or a
Yes.
political dispute, but they only think in integration. It's not like in the 90s where there was nationalism and integration and you had two different views that are present. Now it's just everyone just defaults integration, and anything that sounds not integration, they don't know what to do with it.
Wow. This sister said a black woman said on Twitter she was shocked to see three Asians in her school's BSU. It's supposed to be a black student union.
Probably it
That's the
sounds like
other thing too.
California.
There seems to be a forcing to water down black solidarity. Have y'all noticed that? Like if it's
Oh,
a
absolutely.
group, there is a forcing. Well, why ain't you including the Latinos? Well, why ain't you including the other people of color? Well, why ain't you? But then when you see like Latino groups and you see Asian groups, ain't nobody like, well, where's the black people?
Right. Right.
The
Even,
black
even with the language, I don't know when it started, but there's always, the necessity to say black and brown people, black and other marginalized people. There's always, this need and necessity to have this, multicultural, you know, um,
Amos Wilson went
include,
in on that too, multiculturalism.
you know, we're all in solidarity, we're all, in this struggle together, right? When you look at it historically, right, we know that historically that has never fared well for us, you know.
Historic. It's just a fact.
It is. I mean, it cannot be refuted.
Unfortunately, yeah, it's just a fact. It is what it is. And it's not about being anti anybody else. Like I'm a person, I have a heart. I have a heart for, oppression of any, human being. But at the same time, I have a heart for my people first because I see that my people is at the bottom of every single social economic indicator in this country. Period. And I have a responsibility to work and focus on what's happening with my people first. I have a Malcolm X philosophy. Malcolm X was like, we have to work with ourselves first. We don't mind working with other people. We can work with other people, but we're going to work on ourselves first. That's
But
common sense in my mind.
it is. But this is the thing that I find so, disturbing about that is if we are all fighting against the same enemy, right? Then why can't we just work, in our own spaces, doing the work, fighting against the same enemy, right? The Latina community can work in their own community. We can
Yes.
work in our own, and the work still gets done. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to integrate the spaces in order to have the work,
Well, they,
done.
these people know how powerful Black solidarity is, though. Let's keep it 100. The fear of I have to share this. The last several weeks, I have just been listening to old videos from the 80s. Most of the ones from the 80s don't have like video because, that technology didn't get better to around the 90s. Um, but I've been listening to a lot of videos from older, folks, people in the community, nationalists, uh, been listening to a lot of Farrakhan, honestly, because I never used to really listen to his spiritual pieces, but I've been just listening to just how shrewd the brother is shrewd. You know, I know a lot of people have different issues with Farrakhan, but I have a lot of respect for him. And one of the things that I noticed was that he was always intellectually equipped to deal with their best. You know what I mean? In any forum, from Donahue to, you know, and of course the American media has silenced him now. They figured out like we can't put this nigga on TV, like, because he's becoming bigger. Like people are like, yeah, what's the problem? Because like, yeah, if you listen to him, everything makes sense if you're thinking for yourself. So there's been a switch in the media to tell people what to think instead of giving people. I don't know if y'all noticed that, but there used to be where you would just provide a forum for different debates to happen. And anybody, remember when, oh man, Khaled was on Donahue? Donahue
Yeah,
had all the Black Power people on. You can't,
I was
you
thinking
can't
that.
You know what,
I
like,
was thinking that exact same thing. You used to have there was a wide array. You used to have Deruba Ben Wahad.
now the focus is we have to tell people what to think. We have to put, and so that's why you see everything that you see now. There is not a Black nationalist lens in the mainstream at all. It still exists. We're talking about it, but
Exactly.
it's not in
But
the mainstream like it
you
was.
won't find it on mainstream media. You're going to find a very specific narrative that has been, very carefully crafted,
Mhm.
right? And it is going to be fed to you. That this is the narrative that they want, the only narrative that they want out there. They don't want, any alternative to that. And you can see it, whether it's, Fox News or whether it's MSNBC or CNN.
Mhm. Well, because I'm a solutions oriented sister, so I love to um, interject. In fact, in a meeting that I was in today, we're talking about, well, what scholars, activist scholars, should we invite to be a part of this, this next session? And people was calling out names, and then I said, Wade Nobles. I got to be an insurrectionist. I am going to always, especially those African centered scholars that are still alive, that have not sold out. I am going to recommend them every chance that I get. Every chance that I get, I interject Clenora Hudson Weems. You have no
Hmm.
idea how many African women, especially the really young ones, have never heard of Africana womanism as
right?
a gender ideology. All they know is feminism. That's it.
Right.
In fact, I had an opportunity to pay her to teach some activists that I work with because I'm in that space. And so I am always trying to bring in other thought leaders that have been marginalized in the academy. She absolutely has been marginalized in the academy. And since she's been marginalized in the academy, most newer activists have no clue who she is. They don't even understand Africana womanism. I use Africana womanism in my work. So the young people that I'm working with, the young people that I have an opportunity to mold and to mentor, they're going to know these African centered Black nationalist ideologies. And they will have a choice when they go to college to actually be able to have an intellectual conversation and still stand on what they know if they choose. That is how I see myself right now, is being an insurrectionist in this space, because what I've noticed as being a so-called professional activist is that the academy is very much married to professional activism. If you in a professional activism space, you are brainwashed. And I hate to say that, but you have to think and adorn and check off certain things in order to be successful. I don't know how I've been able to like still be in the space and still be who I am, but I've been able to navigate it up until now. It might not last no more than 2 or 3 more years. So I talk to my husband about that all the time. But for now, I've been able to stay and be exactly who I am and not be an apologist about anything. So I say that to say there are you know, solutions out there. And I think the one of the solutions is if you are in a space and you know better, say something. Cause like
Right.
I be in spaces like I know like certain other people know African Center scholarship, but too scared to speak up. I'm not the one. I will speak up and I will center African scholars and African Center scholars specifically. I have introduced so many young activists to Amos Wilson. Never heard, they always be like, oh, Mama Zakia, I never heard of him. Thank you. I've had so many young people come back to thank me for introducing them to scholars. And they done been through college, y'all. Some of them have been through master's programs.
Well, I think because there's a general fear that, you know, if you take on the position of being African centered, right?
Mhm.
That you know, one, you will be excluded, right?
And
But
sometimes you are.
right, you
Mhm.
are. But not only that, but um, I think that there also is this fear, right, that you will not be considered, or your work won't be validated, right? Because if you are referencing someone who solely speaks to the Black experience, right? That's not considered, you know, someone who is a credible source.
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, you see that, you know, people, even in these online spaces, refer to African centered scholars as being, you know, pseudo scientists or pseudo intellectuals, right?
Yep, exactly.
Right. And I think that that problem that you were speaking of, Zakia, it's also a reflection of the black rinsing of what should be black studies.
Oh
I
man.
think it
Are
is.
there any authentic Black studies departments
I
anywhere
mean,
outside of
I won't say too much, but I think two problems I'll say is one, I think there's the ethno Negroism problem where, you know,
Woo.
there's
Ethno Negroism? Another one. Let me write that down.
so that's a major problem. But the big one, and I think
Ethno
this is the one
Negroism.
that really, well, I think that was really big in the 90s. Oh, not Africa's not a monolith and anti-essentialism, blah, 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 blah. That's
Yeah,
so you know
anti-essentialist.
what that one is. That one's been a while. But I think the one that's been really dangerous because of the amount of sisters getting into the academy has been the feminist secular religion.
And they
It is
funded them.
religion, right? And
They're giving
that
them
has
money, middle class
been
lifestyles.
exactly. It has really. I can just tell you, from experience, it really hits deep. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's anti everything that could,
Mm-hmm.
even if you're not even national. It's just anti everything that is not whatever white liberals want to do,
Mm-hmm.
basically. Because I think it's revealing that Donahue could have, because I was saying this to students the other day. I said, isn't it interesting? Donahue could have Khalid Muhammad or Sister Soldier on his
Had
show,
Sister Soldier. He
shutting
had
down Cornell West on her show.
Shahrazad Ali. Remember,
Right,
she was on there.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But CNN ain't never gonna put none of them on. They would
Nope.
never. Even back then, they never. White liberal, to me, I don't care about alt right people or these. I can tolerate them any time of day. The better my understanding of racism is, the more liberals and Marxists become more annoying because they become the most annoying.
Yeah.
I'd rather that white person who just keeps it a buck with you,
Keep it a buck.
Richard
Right.
Spencer. But I do this in classes all the time. When Richard Spencer was interviewing Charles Barkley, or they wanted, the whole Trump thing, the black paranoia, what the Negro integrationist paranoia, whatever. And Richard Spencer is like, there's a clip. Oh man, I wish I had it on me. But he says to him, like in the interview, he just says to him, I just want for my white people XYZ. I just want you to be African and me to be white. And the look on Charles Barkley's face is, I might have it on my Facebook, but the look on Barkley's face is, it's hilarious because it's just hilarious. Because,
I
and
hate to say he
he's a
from
big
Alabama too, but he
quadrocolonial.
ain't from the part I'm from. Yeah. Hmm.
No, it's hilarious. So it's like for me, it's just I just find that hilarious when we're in denial. Like that's how you know the integrationist perspective is so domineering, and that's
Hmm.
what you're seeing in the media. Is that you're seeing you're seeing the false, you're seeing the representation of the black liberal perspective as
Right.
the black perspective rather
It
than
is not.
a black perspective. The black left isn't so much a big one because they're a bit more structural in their critiques, but they still have a problem of they can't understand that white people are the problem. They still can't kind of don't get that sometimes, but they have a structural critique. Black liberals have a. It's like when I watched Mark Lamont Hill in his exchange with Candace Owens. That wasn't a debate. She just demolished him because she
She
had a stance.
demolished him. Do you
She's
hear
not a
me?
great debater or anything. She just had a stance.
She just
Like
had a
liberals, they
stance.
just float. They just want everyone to get along. So, but there's no political substance. It's just you're okay with whatever white liberals are okay with. It's
Yep.
the blackish phenomena. That's why I said Sister Soldier could come up on a different world and you could see black nationalist perspectives, even though a different world had an integrationist perspective, but you still saw, I think, representation. Though I would say Whitley, I don't think that's an ideal woman for any African man. I always say that. Dwayne Whitley, I think that's the problem. If black, I don't think they're black love goals. I'm being petty. But if you watch Blackish, they would never show a black nationalist person on Blackish at all.
Never.
I think that marks the difference between.
And that's to the point somebody said earlier. They and I remember when this was happening to Umar, they have made him a caricature and a joke. You know what I mean? Because they saw him getting this huge like social media following and huge crowds, you know what I mean, in the community. And I thought that was an interesting, and I think some of that is true. And I think, unfortunately the brother didn't have the discipline when the attack came that he needed to really be able to withstand it, as some of our other leaders have been able to do. But listen, you all, what are some of your closing thoughts in terms of how, I talked a little bit about, some things that we can do in terms of remedying the situation with our kids, and like teaching them the truth, making sure that they know the history that they need to know, the history that we know is not being taught K through 12. Hell, is not even being taught in college in some, to some extent. What are some other thoughts that you all could, would like to share that could help stem the tide a little bit of the black people, being brainwashed into thinking having a white person on your arm is a charm or is a thing to do?
Well, for me, I think that we have to be, unwavering in our position, right? Regardless of where we find ourselves, because there's also this notion that, oh, I live in Seattle. There aren't any black people, in Seattle, and so that's why I date. And I always find that so interesting,
Right.
particularly as someone, who has lived, now in two different countries. Here in Ghana, I've yet to see, any of the Indian men, pursuing Ghanaian women, because they, are a minority here in Ghana. Likewise with the Lebanese men. I don't know what if they fly back to Lebanon, and find them a partner and bring them back here, but they somehow seem to maintain, right, that racial solidarity and uphold the line, right? Something that we can't seem to do. And I think that has to do with the fact that because, we are not willing, to set, those, strict lines of demarcation, right? And say that this is not going to be acceptable. And I think that we have to make people who are in our personal spaces, right, including family members, we have to make them feel uncomfortable. You know, that's one thing that I can say, right, that I witnessed firsthand living in Israel, right, is Israelis make their loved ones, their friends, their family members, they make them feel very uncomfortable about the idea of miscegenation, right?
I
We don't
remember
do
you
that.
talking about that. Yeah, I
Right.
remember you bringing that up about Israel. It's interesting. Nobody
You
talks about
know,
that though. And
right.
like,
We don't do that. But if our cousin comes, to the family cookout with Chet, we're like, oh, make her feel comfortable. And so that's something that is a policy that I have adopted in my own personal life. Right. People that are in my space, people that I care about, whether it's family members or whatever, I make it very well known, right, my position as it relates to bedroom colonialism, because you're not going to occupy and share my space with me, and I'm not going to make my view, but you're going to feel a sense of discomfort in my presence, right? Because I don't want that to be the status quo, right? And that's how that becomes the status quo, because people, as you said, they don't speak out and they don't speak against something, you know they just accept it, and then after a year or two, whatever, it becomes the norm, right? Now it's not just cousin Lakeisha that's bringing Chet to the family cookout. It's John that's bringing his Asian girlfriend, you know and Jaleesa that's bringing her Spanish boyfriend, you know and before you know it, right, that the third generation of children, no one is bringing an African boyfriend or girlfriend, because this is the standard that has been accepted. I saw it in my own family, and I remember when my first cousin was she was the first person to marry someone that was not African. She married a white man, and I explicitly remember my grandfather making a huge ordeal about it, so much to the point that he boycotted the wedding. And actually,
Serena's father wasn't at her wedding.
Yep.
he he
Number
was
five.
in complete opposition to any of us attending the wedding, right? But I see now, right, that this one cousin, she kind of like opened the floodgates, right? Because once the family accepted her union with this white man, then now here comes the next one and the next one.
Mm, wow.
And so it's become, acceptable. And then the family, something that was once considered a taboo, right? And we're not talking about, something that happened like, over, you know, 50, 60 years, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I'm glad that didn't happen in my family because the uncle that I was talking about, his kids who don't look black, all of their mates are black. All of them. He had three mixed kids, whatever you want to call them, and literally all of the grandchildren are black. All
But
of them.
they had to be socialized, right?
They
They
were.
had
They
to be.
were definitely socialized as black. Yeah. That's the thing. Like, that's what I'm saying. The socialization, like, that's why you see, like, the socialization is different now. So, like,
Right.
the kids were socialized as black because they went to black schools. That was the thing. And they lived in Cleveland, Ohio, but they went to black schools. Sometimes they went to like some mixed schools and white schools, but for the most part, that they were socialized. And none of his kids have ever had a white partner that I know of.
And it is. And, I just want to make a point about something that may seem trivial, right? But it speaks to how we are manipulated, right? I remember in my teen and young adult years, right? The ideal attractive, male was a clean shaven man, right? Over the last, I would say maybe 5 to 7 years, right? What is the ideal man now? Okay. We were socially, right, conditioned, engineered. You cannot go on
You see a lot of
any.
brothers growing beards now.
Exactly. Not just brothers, but white men as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, they've
But
always
but,
kind
but,
of had beards.
but
Some of
where
them.
but where did that come? Where did that trend come from? Right
Yeah, yeah.
now, you talk to a woman, no, he got to have a beard, you know. But it's because we were socially that was something that was implanted in our minds, that this is now the standard of what is deemed attractive and desirable in a
Right,
male.
right.
And that's just on a small scale. That's something small. That's something minute, you know.
Well, I think it's up to us to come up with reasons why that it's important to stay with your own for
Yeah,
our
we
children.
have to combat that, and we have to be unapologetic in doing that.
Mm-hmm. Talawa?
I would just add, in terms of, so we have to be clear about boundaries, and I think both of y'all covered why. I would just add to, we need to be affirming of ourselves. So
Yes.
I'll give it just to give context to this because I just became a father recently. So
Yes.
one of the questions, because we have family members who are confused and stuff like that, and me and my wife both get these. And also, when you're getting into a relationship with somebody before you have kids, you need to make sure they have the same politics as you.
That's right.
Absolutely.
You have to
I'm
really
so
be
glad me and my husband on the same
right.
page
You
about
have to
just
be
about everything.
unwavering about that because I've seen where people haven't been unwavering with their politics and where people have been clear. I think as a young child, seeing that had a huge impact on me just from experience. So you have to get with somebody who actually, like, one of the things with my wife, I have no problem saying it's my compliment. The first conversation we had was about nationalism. That was our very first conversation, and I knew I was going to marry her. I said, I knew it. I knew it because it wasn't I didn't have to go through the stress of, oh, when she gets upset if I talk about the crackers this way, or if I think black only. That part was clear, so there was no stress there. Because when it comes to bedroom colonialism, you don't want a situation like the Williams, where Richard, I know, is not for her being with no Urugu, but maybe the mom might not be that critical because I believe the mom probably
Clearly, she ain't.
she's not. So when one parent is going one way or the other, and I've seen that, and I'm not saying it always means they're gonna go into bedroom colonialism, but it leaves room for that. So
Right.
you make relations with that, that's critical. But in terms of being affirming, this is where our aesthetic traditions as African people become important. Our tastes and desires. It's very important. African women looking like African women. It's very important. African men looking like African men and embracing aesthetics that are very distant as possible from your. It's given our conditions that are as distant as possible from European or Asian aesthetics, right? That could be, our hairstyles, the media we consume, the music we consume, anime. My child's not touching no anime.
Wow.
Right. I'm very serious about that. That's why I got Quayle, subscribed to Quayle Media. There's some questionable things on there, but
Yeah,
it's back on.
we got Quayle too.
Right.
My
Quayle,
daughter.
there's some good stuff on there. You gotta still vet stuff your kids
Yeah,
watch.
definitely.
Also, there's a Pan Africanist platform that I'm on, social media platform at bb2me.com. And they also have a media platform as well. You might be interested, Sakia. I make sure I'm on all those things. So everything that you do, even the subtle things, must say that black is your norm. Because one of the things those family members will ask me, and my wife's been asked this, the way she responds is better than I do, but it's, what do you do if your son ends up, they wouldn't say crack, but I would say with a crack, whatever, the person's not black. And my wife's response was, we failed as parents. And that's her,
That's how I would feel.
that's her quick thing, we failed as parents. Mine has always been, that wouldn't even been a thought for my child because it's only socialization.
It's
So it
social.
wouldn't be a thought. It's just things we do. It doesn't come up. But best believe, though, you do have to teach your children about racism and the problem of Urugu. That's why Marimbani wrote Urugu. So it's important to also
That's such an important take.
understand the battlefield, so to speak. So I would say those two, being affirming and knowing the battlefield, you need to have a healthy balance of both. Because if you're into, this is what white people do, they're racist, they terrorize you, a lot of sometimes with our people, we'll try to find the exceptional white person. I notice we do that. We will find them anywhere. If it's we will go in Mars, we'll find it. So we'll find it everywhere. I've learned that because even with family members who are more confused, I used to say, look, I want black children. So if you can't become an ancestor, right, in African culture if you don't have children to venerate you, and
Wow.
being an ancestor is what you do for your community. So being in tune with our spiritual systems and their political context of those spiritual systems, not just doing the rituals and then, say, I'm going to go be initiated into Yoruba and then go, screw a cracker or whatever. No, 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 because that's not correct, right?
Right.
It's they're nationalist in their
Hmm.
actual context. That's another story another time. But I think the more you practice your culture and the politics of that culture, the easier it becomes. It just becomes easy. But and also the environments you choose to be socially active and deeply engaged in, I think is important.
Absolutely. This has been a great conversation, you guys. Every time, you both bring it. And I wanted to, leave the audience with, some some strategies and some things to do. You brought up Ururu. I think that is a must read. That is one of the texts in the nationalist community that is a must read, period. Um, I certainly recommend the text from Dr. Amos Wilson. Blueprint for Black Power is the magnum opus. That one is about 900 pages. I'm not even finished with it, but there are resources out there. You just have to know how to plug into them and make sure that you're taking time to actually read books and stop going to Google for everything, because Google also will suppress certain voices and
Absolutely.
able to find certain people. You have to like you just have to have that. I shout out to the people who basically politicized me. That's Dr. Tway at Sinclair Community College. He's retired now, but he was a part of the US organization back in the day. I mean, I know there's problems with that in Maulana Karinga, but at least he introduced me to the idea of cultural nationalism, and I was able to just take it from there. But
Hmm.
absolutely. So, thank you all. And sister, I appreciate you as always joining us. I know the time, it's late there, right? In Ghana, I know it's super late. So,
Yeah, it's 1:30 in the morning.
oh my goodness, right? So yes, so we're gonna wrap this up. I really appreciate you both as always. You always have a spot on this channel, anytime. He said titles of the books. Yorugu is the title. The author is why am I having a brain fart? Talawa, the author of Yorugu. Marimba Ani.
Remember, I mean,
Yes. Marimba Ani is the author. You should read all her books, Brother Emmanuel. But Dr. Amos Wilson, I would recommend Falsification of African Consciousness. His
mhm.
books are not that long. That's the other thing. Other than Blueprint for Black Power,
Yeah,
you can
blueprint.
get through Falsification, like probably within a weekend if you're an avid reader. Yeah, so please read Falsification of African Consciousness. I would also recommend there's a book, Garveyism and the New World Order. Just Google that; it will come up, or Yahoo somebody. But Amos Wilson, Garveyism. I forget that whole title, but Garvey is in the title, and something about the New World Order. That's a good one too, a real good one.
Another book that I want to add is Jacob Carruthers, and that's An Island of Memes.
Okay, an island of memes. Intellectual warfare
Memes.
is another good one by Jacob Carruthers.
Oh my
And it's really good because I think that the fact that we have been under siege for so long, right, and that we have been embedded in this Eurocentric environment, right, I think that we have forgotten what it means to be African, right?
Yes.
So I think that before we can pass on anything to our children,
Mm-hmm.
or to our grandchildren, or to the greater community, we have to first start with ourselves and start deconstructing and decolonializing our own minds.
Mm-hmm.
And so that begins with, mending this fractured consciousness that we're all suffering from. And so that's a good place to start.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, because we want to lead the people with resources. And, sometimes it's not always a YouTube video, but I would still recommend if you're able to find YouTube videos of Amos Wilson, listen to all of them.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, if you're able to find Amos Wilson on YouTube, listen to all them joints. You gonna get a yeah, but I nothing compares to the books. Um, and try not to get them on Amazon, please.
Oh, right.
You
There's
live,
so many different sources. They're black. There's an online black bookstore, House of Pages. It's owned by a sister in Atlanta.
yeah,
And most of the books that we just, listed, you can buy them there.
yeah.
Oh
But
wow.
and if you live in DC and Baltimore, there's a black bookstore. You got Sankofa in DC, and then you got Everybody's Place in Baltimore. You got Marcus Books in Oakland. These are bookstores that I know that are still open that I patronize myself. So yes, please try to buy from a African bookstore owner. Thank you guys. With that,
Thank you.
make sure you all subscribe if you're new here, and share this video. I think it's important, to share, and
And
maybe
hit that like button.
hit the like button.
Oh
Make
yeah,
sure. Hey, listen. Make sure y'all share it. I mean, if you want to start a conversation with somebody, share it. You know what I mean? Have a conversation. Use it as political education for sure. Appreciate you all. Hopefully, everybody take care. And yeah, we'll see you all hopefully next week for sure.
all
Peace.
right.